They said she walked away from legacy, that she threw away privilege for a fantasy. But when fate placed her parents and their biggest client aboard her luxury train, they discovered the truth. She hadn't lost direction. She'd built her own. This is the story of Raina Coltrane, a black woman who turned rejection into railways, silence into strength, and doubt into a billion-dollar line of her own making. Before you ride this journey with her, hit like if you believe success is the best revenge. Subscribe or follow for more real-life comeback stories that prove, no matter who underestimates you, your vision can still arrive on time. My name is Raina Coltrane, 33 years old, founder and CEO of Marigold Rail Collective, a company that designs and operates private, point-to-point luxury sleeper trains for executives who'd rather think, meet, and rest than sprint through security lines. That's what my letterhead says. To Leonard and Patrice Coltrane, my parents, I was for years the daughter who veered off the map, the one who refused to inherit Coltrane Advisory Partners, their celebrated corporate turnaround consultancy. I grew up in Briarcrest, Maryland, a manicured enclave 20 minutes from downtown Washington, D.C., where success was a language everyone spoke fluently and empathy was considered a nice-to-have. Our 5-bedroom contemporary home gleamed with designer furniture that no one actually sank into. I learned early that the house, like our last name, was for display. Watch how your father reframes objections, my mother would whisper, tugging me into the home office as Leonard conducted calls on speaker, his voice smooth as lacquer. One day you'll need this when you take the helm. At 7, my extracurriculars weren't soccer or tap. They were mock client briefings and posture lessons. The bookshelf in my room sagged under the weight of strategy Bibles instead of stories. When I brought home an A- in 4th grade science, my father signed me up for Saturday lab intensives and said evenly, Coltranes do not flirt with average. The drumbeat never stopped. Dinner sounded like a case competition debrief, cost curves, portfolio rationalization, client acquisition funnels. By the time most kids learn ratios, I could recite the differences between chapter 7 and 11 and define carve-out in my sleep. The fault line opened the day I fell in love with a sound. We were crawling through traffic along the Anacostia when a restored heritage locomotive thundered past on a parallel track, pulling a string of vintage varnish in deep green and gold. The horn rolled across the water, a low cathedral note that settled in my bones. I pressed my palms to the window. Look at that train, I breathed. Imagine living on one, moving and home at the same time. Patrice didn't look up from her email. A phase, Raina. Rail is nostalgia. Real futures are built in boardrooms, not cabooses. Nostalgia, or not, the seed took root. I started sneaking transportation histories out of the school library, tucking them under my bed the way other kids hid comic books. I memorized maps the way some girls memorized lyrics, tracing corridors, northeast, crescent, sunset like lifelines. By high school, I fulfilled the Coltrane curriculum, AP Economics, debate team captain, perfect GPA, and then vanished into the stacks to devour everything about operations, signaling, rolling stock, and corridor rights. At 16, the universe sent an accomplice, Mr. Avery Hollis, a black man with calm eyes and a voice like warm oak, who lived down the block and happened to be a senior dispatcher for a regional railroad. He noticed the track diagrams I was sketching on graph paper and started talking to me on evening walks about timetables and headways, dwell times and dispatch windows. You've got a systems brain, he told me. Ever consider transportation systems management? You can blend business with infrastructure. It's not either/or. A door cracked open in my mind. I began researching programs that married logistics with leadership. When I left my laptop open on the kitchen island with tabs for transit planning and rail operations programs, Leonard found them. The confrontation that followed rattled the crystal in our dining room hutch. We have invested years preparing you for a serious career, he said, pacing, jaw tight. You want to throw it away to what? Play conductor on a nostalgia tour? It's not cosplay, I said, keeping my voice steady. Mobility is a growth industry. Freight, passenger, corridor modernization, there's leverage in how people and goods move. Patrice folded her hands, the picture of poise. Dahlia Brooks's son just accepted an offer from Fairhaven School of Management. Meanwhile, you want to sell sleeping berths. Comparisons were a family sport, and I was always the cautionary tale. When acceptance season came, I did the expected, applied to my parents' alma mater for straight business, and the unexpected, several programs with transportation systems tracks. An acceptance from Prairie and Coastal University, PCU, with a scholarship for infrastructure and mobility management had me floating. Leonard took the letter between two fingers and ripped it cleanly in half. You'll attend Potomac Metropolitan University for Business, he said, voice cool. Or you can fund college yourself. I picked survival. I signed PMU's offer and told myself it was a detour, not a destiny. If they wouldn't bankroll my dream, I'd learn what they valued and convert it into what I valued. College became a covert operation. In corporate finance, I modeled rolling stock leases instead of widget factories. In marketing, I wrote a go-to-market plan for membership-based sleeper service instead of a yogurt brand. Electives? Network optimization, transport policy, supply chain analytics, all useful for consulting. According to Patrice, and perfect bricks for the railway, I was laying inside my head. Then came the catalyst. Professor Lila Wickham, who had spent 15 years as COO at a major commuter rail operator before turning to academia. After her guest lecture on capacity planning, I lingered, and our conversation spilled into the hallway, then the faculty lounge. You frame operations like a chessboard, not a spreadsheet, she said finally. Why aren't you in our transport track? I told her the truth, the expectations, the ultimatum, the careful tightrope I'd been walking. She nodded like she'd seen this movie before. You can love your people and still refuse their script, she said. Come to my office hours. Let's see what doors we can unlock. Lila became a quiet lighthouse. She pointed me to journals, introduced me to planners and operations chiefs, and pushed a slip of paper across her desk one afternoon. HarborLink Rail is hiring summer operations interns. It's not glamorous, graveyard shifts, storm reroutes, but you'll learn what the world looks like from the dispatch console. I took it. I told my parents it was a transportation strategy internship. Technically true, materially different. HarborLink was baptism by steel and static. I learned to thread trains through rush hours without knuckling the timetable, to talk to engineers who measured respect in seconds saved, to scan radar and dispatch sheets at the same time. When a thunderstorm knocked out signals on a Friday night, I watched the chief, another black woman with braids coiled into a crown, rebuild the railroad in her head and then in the system, one block at a time. Somewhere between the 210 advisory and the last bus bridge, I thought, this is where I belong. I graduated magna cum laude with the business degree my parents demanded and a second, unofficial major in how networks breathe. 2 weeks later, a thick envelope arrived from Coltrane Advisory Partners, a junior partner track with a glossy trajectory and a starting salary that would make a new consultant weep. That same day, HarborLink Rail offered me an operations analyst role that paid roughly a third. We met at Maison Dunbar, Leonard and Patrice's favorite downtown restaurant, the kind of place where the server addresses you by your last name and the butter has a resume. My parents were already celebrating. To Raina Coltrane, Leonard declared, lifting his glass. The next phase begins. It does, I said. I've accepted HarborLink's offer in operations. Patrice froze, flute halfway to her mouth. You've done what? The next hour unspooled exactly as I expected. Disbelief, bargaining, a swift pivot to condescension. When you tire of night shifts in a control room, Leonard said, our door is open. The following weekend, I packed my hatchback and moved into a tiny one-bedroom not far from Union Station, where the night air hummed with wheel flanges and the faint electric whine of locomotives idling. While my classmates posted rooftop parties with signing bonuses, I learned the smell of brake dust and coffee at 3 a.m., and I fell asleep to the click of a wall clock in dispatch, a metronome for timetables. I lived small and studied big. Every extra shift was a masterclass. I shadowed maintenance of way, sat with schedulers, asked engineers why a meet would work on paper and die on the rails. When a blizzard strangled the corridor and everyone said, we can't, I remembered Lila's voice and asked, "What can we, safely, bend?" One night, a storm knocked out a swath of catenary. In the chaos, a VIP party, Caleb Hart, CEO of Helios Dynamics, and his team, was stranded in a private lounge, desperate to reach a dawn summit in Santa Fe. While everyone shrugged helplessly, I noticed a domino path, an idle set of refurbished sleepers positioned for a weekend excursion, a cleared freight window we could lease under a rarely used interline clause, a slot on a secondary route still green on the board. I called legal, dispatch, the host railroad, and a short line operator I'd brought donuts to for 6 months. We stitched a legal, safe workaround, a late night, limited consist special with a diner, 2 sleepers, and a lounge, crewed under emergency rules, with an escort on the diesel leg. As we waited for the last sign-off, Hart studied me. "Most people tell me why a thing can't be done," he said. "You keep finding the hinge." "On a network," I said, "impossible usually means we haven't found the rule that lets us reroute." He made his summit. 3 weeks later, he asked me to come run his corporate mobility division, double my salary, a chance to learn premium sleeper charters from the inside. I said yes. For 3 years, I lived inside that world: car acquisition, consist design, crew bases, F&B programs that made people forget they were moving. I learned where luxury and reliability shake hands, and where they fight. I met FBO equivalents in the rail world, private lounges and secure platforms few people know exist. I scribbled notes in the margins of my days. Transparent pricing, membership that buys time, not just threads count, concierge beyond the platform. I invited my parents to dinner with a portfolio of what I managed: 3 train sets, a 22-person team, testimonials from executives who now measured time in overnight runs instead of layovers. Patrice skimmed like she was reading a flyer for a yard sale. "I'm glad you found stable employment," she said. "Though I didn't imagine all that education would land you in hospitality." "I'm not a porter," I said. "I run a multi-million-dollar mobility operation." "Offer to join the firm stays open," Leonard said, like he was extending mercy and not erasing the last 5 minutes. I left early, the truth settling like ballast. They might never accept who I was becoming. If I wanted peace, I'd have to build it without their blessing. That's when Marigold Rail Collective stopped being a page of ideas and became a plan. I'd heard the same complaints from every executive I served: opaque quotes, rigid timetables, an attitude that you're lucky to be aboard. I sketched a different promise: clarity, flexibility, and care, with technology that showed real-time availability and pricing that didn't hide traps in the fine print. I imagined membership tiers that traded status symbols for guaranteed time windows, conference cars that felt like boardrooms instead of afterthoughts, and a concierge team that booked everything from ground transfers at both ends to late-night soup for a nervous stomach. For 6 months, I slept too little and dreamed in spreadsheets. When the model finally held, I took it to Caleb. He read every line, tested every assumption, then leaned back. "Rail eats naive startups for breakfast," he said. "You don't sound naive. What do you need?" With $420,000 from Caleb and $60,000 of my savings, I signed a lease on 2 meticulously restored sleepers and a lounge, arranged access agreements with 2 corridor owners, and rented a sliver of office space in a converted warehouse at Ridgefield Yard. We were 5 people and 1 espresso machine. I gave notice at Helios and jumped. Everything went wrong, then worse. Our first lease fell through 3 days before signature because a competitor whispered that a young black woman was optics risky for investors. A bank sat on our working capital line for 5.5 weeks, and I didn't cut myself a paycheck the entire quarter. We slept on a thrift store sofa and drank coffee that tasted like stubbornness. A first client signed, and then dissolved in a merger. We made the payment on rolling stock and watched the balance blink thin. And then the hinge moved. A mid-market CEO was stranded when a storm stranded commercial flights, and his driver got stuck behind a pileup on I-70. Everyone he called said no. We had a window. I personally coordinated the consist, matched catering to his preferences, no dairy, late-night fruit, ginger tea, arranged a secure transfer on both ends, and put a handwritten card on his pillow. He made the meeting and signed a 9-month agreement the next week. He posted briefly about the rail company that made the impossible feel easy. 3 more clients came by word of mouth. Small Enterprise Mobility named us one to watch. 8 months in, we added 2 more cars and, for the first time, posted a real monthly operating profit, modest but ours. We moved from that storage closet office to a glass front suite off the private platform. Clients stepped from black sedans into our lobby with custom woodwork and a quiet logo, marigold, a flower that thrives in heat. I hired people the big players took for granted. A senior scheduler with hands like a pianist and a memory for corridors. A maintenance lead who could hear a wheel flat 2 cars away. A client care director poached from a 5-star hotel who understood how to make a room exhale. Our message wasn't chandeliers. It was time and attention. Luxury, to me, was not apologizing to your life for how you got there. By year 2, we ran 3 curated consists, kept a small roster of contract engineers and attendants, and opened small offices in Chicago and Savannah to anchor the north-south and east-west legs we used most. I started practicing being a real CEO, letting go of timetables to hold strategy, learning to lead without seeing every bolt tighten with my own hands. An executive coach taught me to build culture deliberately, celebrate loudly, correct quietly, promote on performance, not proximity. Our signature touches emerged without a committee deciding they were on brand. Handwritten welcome notes, pantry items tracked to each client's quirks, a post-journey call that wasn't just a survey, but a conversation. We built policies that admitted our people had families and lives and kept them. We were small. We were steady. And somewhere between the last inspection light clicking off and a dawn arrival that ran like a prayer, I realized the dream I'd whispered at a plate glass window as a kid was replacing the one engraved on a Coltrane plaque. Everything I've told you is prelude. Because the day came when Coltrane Advisory Partners and their largest account would board my flagship train for a high-stakes journey, still imagining I was the girl who went to work at the station. And they had no idea whose name was on the steel. The rumor reached me the way rail news always does, half timetable, half gospel. Orion Meridian Holdings, a sprawling transatlantic tech logistics conglomerate led by Sir Camden Rook, was entering the North American market and had tapped Coltrane Advisory Partners to shepherd the rollout. The engagement was said to be the largest in my parents' history. Someone also mentioned, lightly, like an afterthought, that Orion Meridian wanted executive sleeper service for a roadshow spanning the Mid-Atlantic, Great Lakes, and up into Quebec. 2 mornings later, our sales director slid an envelope across my desk. RFP for premium rail, he said, brows knitting. Submitted by Coltrane Advisory on Orion's behalf. The letter didn't mention me. It read like a standard competitive bid. Safety metrics, corridor access, onboard connectivity, security protocols, catering, border clearance experience. My director hesitated. Given your last name, we can pass. I looked out at the yard. Sun dragging across polished steel, a pair of attendants laughing as they set linens to crisp. We won't pass, I said. We'll compete like we always do. No favors. No flinching. We built the proposal from first principles. Transparent pricing with no equipment repositioning surprises. Membership windows that guaranteed Orion's team's specific departure slots across the route map. Concierge coverage that reached beyond the platform. Secure motorcades in Cleveland. A reserved salon at a quiet hotel in Kingston. Late-night pho for a CFO who hated heavy meals. We showed our border plan. Advance manifests to CBP and CBSA. Pre-cleared inspections coordinated with a private siding near Rouse's Point, a bilingual liaison on board. We did not mention my parents or me. We did not tailor to their ego. We told Orion what Marigold did better than anyone. Protect time, protect focus, and make the travel itself feel like leadership. 3 weeks later the email arrived. Award letter, Executive Mobility Services. Deciding factors, clarity in pricing, depth of service, route reliability, testimonials. Not a word about the coincidence of surnames. The first movement of the roadshow was high profile. DC, Philadelphia, New York, Montreal, with my parents joining the Orion team for in-car briefings. I assigned our flagship consist. The Viola set, A lounge car paneled in black walnut with a hidden media wall, two newest sleepers with sound-dampened vestibules and private showers, and a compact galley where our chef could plate quietly at 2 a.m. if needed. I walked the train stem by stem, running my fingers under polished edges, checking that every latch caught clean. I asked maintenance to reprofile a wheel whose faint flat only I seemed to hear. They smiled and did it anyway. We profiled Sir Camden's preferences through public appearances and quiet calls. Single origin pour-over, not espresso, prefers baritone sax over string quartets when he's reading, avoids shellfish, likes a hot water carafe and sliced lemon within reach. We stocked sorghum caramels from a black-owned confectioner in Louisville because the man had mentioned them once in an interview about childhood memories. We packed a small travel altar, nothing religious, just a tray with smooth river stones and a tea light for a COO who managed panic with ritual. On the ground, we synchronized the rest. Secure sedans with drivers who knew not to narrate the scenery. A back-of-house entrance in Midtown where cameras wouldn't harass them. In Montreal, a French-speaking nurse on call for a VP managing a flare of sciatica. We wrote redundancy into everything, the route, the power, the pantry, so that calm wasn't theater. It was architecture. While logistics clicked into place, the emotional weather churned. I booked an extra session with Dr. Kira Mays, the therapist who'd coached me through sticky family knots and leadership leaps. "What's the worst thing that could happen?" she asked, legs tucked beneath her like an auntie settling in for tea. "They could belittle me in front of my client," I said. "Or try to recast me as their junior. Or act like Marigold is a cute detour." What do you control? My presence. The standards. How I refuse the revisionist history without setting the car on fire. She had me rehearse lines that kept boundaries intact and invited no debate. Later, at my place, my best friend Nia Benton sprawled across my sofa, scrolling a mock family drama bingo card. "Free space. We always believed in you," she grinned. "Square two. We can open doors." "I'm not playing," I said, laughing despite myself. "You don't have to," she replied, softening. "You already won. Show up like the woman who built a railroad out of a whisper." The night before departure, I laid out a charcoal suit that moved like water and a blouse the color of freight car rust. Tiny gold studs shaped like rail spikes. Nothing flashy. Everything intentional. At 5:10, I walked the platform with our crew, verified the dispatch window with a host railroad, reviewed weather rolling east to west. The yard smelled faintly of rain and oiled steel. I gathered the team in the lounge. "This run matters," I said. "Not because of who's boarding, but because we promised what travel could feel like. Quiet excellence. No showboating. If something bumps, we steady before anyone notices." They nodded. Engineers, attendants, chef, concierge, black professionals in crisp uniforms and practiced calm. People who had been told, like me, that excellence was their only permission slip. People who'd earned better than permission. At 9:15, the first black sedan glided to the private gate. Through the glass, I watched Leonard step out in his navy power suit and the gold tie pin he wore 4 wins. Patrice emerged in cream and pearls, posture perfect, smile polished. Between them, Sir Camden Rook, silver-templed, scanning email as an assistant hovered with a leather folio. They did not see me at first. I heard my mother's voice float across the entrance, clipped and easy. "Our daughter? She took a position at a station years ago. Went a different way." Sir Camden's mouth quirked. "My son skipped the family track, too. He's a sculptor." Took me time to understand that courage. Patrice's smile tightened. Well, not everyone can afford creative detours. I stepped from the shadow of the vestibule and let my voice carry. "Good morning, Sir Camden. Welcome to Marigold Rail Collective. I'm Raina Coltrane, founder and chief executive. We're honored to host your journey." My parents' faces flickered, confusion, shock, calculation. An attendant offering welcome glasses of non-alcoholic brute hesitated a beat as Patrice's hand slackened. The stemware kissed the tile and burst into bright shards. The room stilled. Sir Camden glanced from their expressions to my extended hand, and his eyes brightened with amused comprehension. "Coltrane," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Your company's dossier was immaculate. I'm eager to see if the ride matches the brief." "It will," I said. "Shall we tour the consist before departure?" He smiled. "Lead the way." Behind us, I heard my father clear his throat, assembling a new story with old tools. The train's brass number plate threw back the morning sun. The lounge door opened on oiled hinges, and together we stepped aboard. Sir Camden followed me up the narrow stairway into the lounge car, his eyes sweeping over the polished walnut trim, honey gold lighting, and hand-stitched seating that shimmered as the sunlight broke through the platform glass. The rest of the Orion team trailed behind, assistants, analysts, and 2 senior consultants from my parents' firm. Leonard and Patrice came last, faces carefully neutral, posture stiff with disbelief. "Mr. Rook," I said, gesturing toward the panoramic windows, "we designed this space for leaders who think best in motion. Noise cancellation insulation keeps outside decibels below 40. Connectivity is fiber boosted, so your calls are as clear underground as on the open corridor." He ran his hand along the armrest. "This is remarkable, Miss Coltrane. How long have you operated?" "We're celebrating our 6th anniversary this quarter. We run 9 consist sets across the country, all carbon neutral and GPS tracked in real time." Patrice's smile trembled into view. "Of course, Raina's always been determined. We encouraged her independence," she added, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. I didn't turn. "Determination runs in the family," I said evenly. The crew moved with quiet precision, Chef Malik arranging fresh lemon tea and almond cookies on the center table, attendants placing cool towels near every seat. I could feel my parents watching, torn between pride and panic. When we departed, the hum of the rails folded around us, like music. The skyline receded. The car began its glide north. Sir Camden settled opposite me, notebook in hand. "Tell me about your pricing model." "It's unusual. Flat tiers instead of hourly." I nodded. Time shouldn't be a riddle. Clients know exactly what each leg costs. No surprise repositioning fees or surge markups. We trade mystery for reliability. He smiled approvingly. "Clarity. That's rare in this industry." Patrice attempted to steer the spotlight. "Our firm advised several transit conglomerates on expansion strategies," she said, fingers tightening around her cup. "Perhaps our daughter absorbed some of that instinct from us." Sir Camden chuckled. "Instinct or inheritance, it's impressive." Leonard leaned forward, trying to reclaim the narrative. "The Coltrane approach has always been about excellence." "Yes," I replied, holding his gaze, "though we define excellence differently." The next hour passed in a rhythm of conversation and astonishment. Camden asked about sustainable fuel partnerships. I explained our hybrid battery pilot program and the minority-owned manufacturing plant we collaborated with in Baton Rouge. Every question revealed another layer of the company my parents had dismissed as a cute side project. By the time lunch was served, herb-roasted chicken, collard green risotto, and caramel bread pudding, the ice around Sir Camden's curiosity had melted into admiration. "Miss Coltrane," he said between bites, "you built this from scratch. It's extraordinary." "Thank you," I said. Extraordinary often starts where permission ends. Across the table, Patrice's hand trembled just enough to rattle her spoon. Hours later, as dusk bruised the sky over the Delaware River, Camden leaned back, satisfied. "I see now why you won the bid. You turned movement into serenity. That's art disguised as logistics." He excused himself to call his European team, leaving me alone with my parents in the dim golden light of the lounge. Leonard finally exhaled. "You might have mentioned that this enterprise was yours." I tried. "For years," I said quietly. "You never asked enough to hear the answer." Patrice stared out the window, her reflection flickering against the glass. "We only wanted stability for you. You wanted replication," I corrected. "A mirror, not a daughter." The train swayed gently, the silence between us louder than any argument we'd ever had. When Sir Camden returned, conversation resumed, contracts, expansion, the possibility of European partnerships. My parents listened as if each word rewrote the family myth. By the time we rolled into Penn Station, Sir Camden had already decided. He wanted Marigold to handle all of Orion's continental travel. He clasped my hand firmly as we stepped onto the platform. Miss Coltrane, expect an offer by Monday. I'd like a long relationship between our companies. Behind him, Patrice blinked rapidly, forcing a brittle smile. We are very proud. Are you? I asked softly. Or just surprised? Her voice faltered. Maybe both. The attendants called for reboarding. The engines hummed. I turned toward the window, watching my parents retreat into the crowd, their silhouettes smaller than I remembered. For the first time, I didn't chase after their approval. The track ahead glowed silver under the station lights, clear and entirely mine. 2 days after the Orion Marigold journey, news traveled faster than any train. Sir Camden's team had issued an internal statement praising an exceptional logistics partner whose efficiency redefines executive travel. Within the week, the contract was officially expanded to cover all of Orion's North American operations, tripling the deal's value. That one should have felt like pure celebration, but family rarely lets victory stay simple. A courier delivered a heavy envelope from Coltrane Advisory Partners. Inside, a handwritten note from Leonard, clipped and formal. We'd like to discuss strategic collaboration opportunities. Your profile is now being noticed by clients in our orbit. Translation: now that you're useful, we'd like credit. I sat at my desk, reading it once, twice. The skyline outside my new headquarters, a glass and steel facility facing the rail yard, glinted under mid-morning sun. 6 years earlier, I'd begged them to believe in me. Now, they wanted to leverage me. My assistant Nia peeked in. Good news or bad? Neither, I said. Just predictable. She smiled knowingly. How do you want to play it? Professionally, I replied. But not personally. The following month, Marigold Rail Collective and Coltrane Advisory Partners found themselves serving overlapping clients again. I insisted on strictly formal channels. Emails routed through account managers, meetings booked through scheduling portals. No private dinners. No family calls disguised as business. Our expansion accelerated. We added 4 new consists, hired 60 more staff, and opened outposts in Denver and Toronto. Industry media started calling me the quiet disruptor. At one gala, a reporter asked, "What drives you?" "Silence," I said, "and the need to fill it with something better." The quote went viral, but the personal aftermath was more complicated. My parents finally invited me to dinner at their home, the first time in 6 years. I went. The house looked smaller. The portraits on the wall were unchanged. Leonard mid-handshake with CEOs, Patrice accepting an award in tailored navy silk. The conversation was polite until the coffee arrived. "We're proud of you," my mother said at last. "We just didn't see it coming." "I did," I replied gently. That was enough. Leonard adjusted his cufflinks. "Your company's momentum could align with our global projects. You'd have access to government contracts, corporate boards." "I have access," I interrupted. What I lacked was belief, and I've already replaced that. He sighed, then nodded once. "You've become formidable." "Independent," I corrected. Patrice reached across the table, fingers trembling slightly. "Reina, maybe it's time to stop seeing us as the enemy." I smiled, a small, tired smile. I just stopped needing rescuing. In the weeks that followed, something unexpected happened. My parents began showing up differently. Patrice started mentioning Marigold's achievements to her peers. Leonard forwarded potential client introductions, quietly, respectfully, no strings attached. It wasn't redemption, it was revision. The air between us, once static with resentment, now carried hesitant respect. One night, Nia and I stood on the platform watching the viola set roll out under the stars. "You ever think you'd get here?" she asked. "Not like this," I said. But maybe this was the only way. I thought of that first childhood glimpse, a train slicing through dusk, unstoppable, and realized that the motion itself had become my language. The noise of disappointment, the ache for approval, the years of fighting to be heard, they had all been fuel. And now, every mile of polished track whispered the same truth. I had built my own line home. By the 8th anniversary of Marigold Rail Collective, the company that once ran from a repurposed freight office had transformed into a continental network. We now operated 12 luxury consist sets, connecting cities and borders with seamless precision. Our headquarters overlooked the corridor that had carried every gamble I'd ever taken. That year, industry press called us the soul of modern luxury transit. Awards followed, service excellence, sustainability innovation, even a civic citation from the mayor of Atlanta, where we'd opened our first southern hub. But the recognition that mattered most came quieter. At an entrepreneurship summit, a young woman approached me after my keynote. She wore the same look I used to have, equal parts hope and hesitation. "My parents run an accounting firm," she said. "They say my dream of working in aeronautics isn't serious." Hearing your story, her voice cracked. It gave me permission to keep going. That moment undid me, in the best way. For the first time, I saw my struggle not as survival, but as blueprint. Privately, life softened in ways I hadn't expected. Patrice began calling once a week, short, warm check-ins without hidden agendas. Sometimes she'd ask about staff wellness programs or the design of our new training lounge, genuinely curious. Leonard, who once couldn't imagine me outside a boardroom, emailed a congratulatory note after our feature in Modern Rail Business. He signed it proudly, Dad. I didn't pretend that years of hurt had vanished, but I accepted the small repairs as what they were, progress, not perfection. Therapy helped me untangle the last knots of resentment. You learned self-worth in the absence of applause, Dr. Mays reminded me. That's why it's sturdy now. She was right. The silence that used to sting now felt like peace. That spring, we broke ground on Marigold's European extension, partnering with a consortium in Lisbon to connect emerging green corridors across the continent. The first transatlantic test run, New York to Lisbon via a hybrid vessel, was scheduled for next year. I stood on the platform one late evening, the hum of engines below me, city lights painting gold streaks across the tracks. Mia joined me, camera slung over her shoulder. "You know," she said, "the girl who stared out a car window dreaming of trains? She'd be screaming right now." I laughed. She'd be late for dispatch. As I walked back through the lounge, I passed the plaque we'd hung near the entrance. Built on vision, not permission. RC. That was my quiet rebellion, my love letter to anyone who's ever been told to shrink. In interviews, journalists often ask me about revenge, if proving my parents wrong was the goal. I always answer the same way. No. The goal was to prove myself right. Because success born from spite burns out fast. But success born from belief, even if you had to build that belief alone, can power you for a lifetime. So, whenever someone doubts you, remember this. You don't need their applause to move forward. Lay your own tracks. And let the sound of your progress drown out the noise behind you. Raina Coltrane's story isn't just about trains or triumph. It's about redemption through self-definition. She learned that the loudest no can become the engine that carries you forward, and that success only feels real when it's built on your own terms. If you've ever been underestimated, dismissed, or told your dreams were impractical, remember this. You don't have to inherit someone else's blueprint for greatness. You can design your own route and arrive exactly where they said you never could. If Raina's journey inspired you, tap like to keep stories of Black excellence and resilience alive. Share this with someone who's still fighting to be seen, and drop a comment telling us what moment made you realize your dream was worth defending. Follow for more powerful true-to-life stories of vindication, ambition, and self-made success.